Good afternoon, everyone. This is week 11. We're going to talk about output determination and inflation. And the topic we're going to cover today is inflation. All right, so before we start the inflation chapter, we need to understand a couple of terms. The first thing is about business cycle. Business cycle will actually tell us about how the business go through. And every year, the business will have some ups and downs. And I have showed a little bit on last class about business cycle, but I will show you here today how it looks like in very short. Here it is. You can see that every business will go through this process over time. And on the x-axis, we have the time, and the y-axis, we have the real GDP here. Okay. So when the business starts to grow, we call that time, we call that as an expansion process. And this expansion will keep on going until we reach the peak level. When the business reaches its peak level, it starts to drop, which we call that as recession. In GDP, the real GDP will start to drop, and we call that a recession. Okay. So when the business actually go through the expansion process, real GDP will start to grow. Okay. And when it grows to the top, it will start to drop again, which is known as recession. And it will start to, when the business cycle start to drop, the business will be going through some bad time, and the output level will be going down. And we call that process as recession. Okay. When the recession reaches is at the bottom level, we call the trough level. Okay. And again, it starts to go up, which is known as expansion. It starts to expand again. So business will always go through all these steps. Okay. It's the normal procedure of any business. Okay. Every country will go through these things, these phases. Then we'll talk about aggregate demand. Then we'll talk about aggregate supply, equilibrium situation of business, price level. That's what is about inflation. And inflation is two types: demand pull inflation and cost push inflation. So the topic is not that very long today. It's a very short topic today. And I think we have only around 20 slides. Okay. So what is aggregate demand and aggregate supply model? The aggregate demand and aggregate supply model is macroeconomic model that explains the price level and output through the relationship of aggregate demand and aggregate supply. Okay, so this is the aggregate demand aggregate supply model that will actually explain us the price level and the output through the relationship of aggregate demand and aggregate supply. And how it is explained in diagram, this is the one. It explains in this way. Let me explain it a little bigger. We have discussed these things in previous class and last class, and these things we started the class a little bit late on last week due to some technical issues I had. Okay. All right, so here you can see that we tried to explain on last week that the first diagram here, okay, first diagram here is actually trying to show you relationship with the aggregate. You see this 45-degree line? This line will be reflecting our aggregate demand curve. Okay, so aggregate demand curve is inversely related to the inflation outcome, the national income. Okay, it actually has a relationship, is inversely related with the national income. Let's see if I can. So you can see here that aggregate demand curve is inversely related to the national income. So which means that when the aggregate demand will be increasing, the aggregate demand will be increasing, it will be actually, then national income will be also increasing too here. So you can see that when you look at this way, the price level and the national income is inversely related here. See this line here, this is inversely related. Okay, when the national income will be increasing. Okay, so you can see price level goes high and the national income will be dropping. So this is known as the real GDP. Okay, when a price level will be going high, the real GDP will be falling actually. Okay, it will be falling. And that's what the meaning here. And here we'll discuss about the relationship, how it works. So we know this one, that aggregate demand is equal to C plus I plus G plus X minus M. Okay, so this is our aggregate demand. And it says that aggregate demand curve shows the combination of price level and the real income when the goods market in equilibrium. So it's actually showing you the relationship. It's actually showing you the relationship between the aggregate demand curve and the price level. So now look, it happens for a couple of reasons. The first one is the wealth or income effect. It says here, as the price falls, when the price will be dropping, real income will be increasing. Okay, so how it happens? Because when the price will be falling, okay, consumption will be increasing. Okay, when the price will fall, it means the price of the goods will be dropping, people will be consuming more. When the consumption goes high, aggregate demand increases and the national income also increases. So you can see that here, right here it is. If C, I, G, and X, any four of these increases, aggregate demand will be increasing. Okay. And next one is about interest rate effect. So the interest rate will be actually dropping. Interest rate will drop and investment will be increasing. So if there is less interest rate, okay, when there will be less interest rate, the business will be actually investing more. That's the whole point. Okay, when the interest rate will be dropping, investment will be high because the business people, they will be actually investing more. Okay. So, and as a result, our aggregate demand will be increasing and the national income will be increasing too. Now, what is the relationship between interest rate and the price? Okay. When the price will be dropping, there will be less inflation, the price will be dropping, then the real money supply will be increasing. Now, the question is, what is real money supply? Okay. Right. So money supply means that when how much money will be floating within the economy, how much money will be circulating within the economy. That's what is known as money supply. Now, what is real money supply? Real money supply means that the value will be coming up. Okay. When you will be actually considering the real money supply, you have to consider money supply to be considered without the inflation. Okay. So, for example, let's say, how do we mean by without the inflation? Look, the value of money matters here. It's not about the quantity of money, rather this is actually the value of money. Okay, so it is actually the value of money. So how do we determine the value of money? Value of money is determined by the purchasing power of money. Okay. So how do we calculate the purchasing power of money? Well, purchasing power of money is this: how much the same money can buy. Okay, that's the question comes here. That how much the money can buy, the real money can buy. Okay, for example, let's say you have $10. Let's say that you have $10, and with this $10, you can purchase, let's say, for example, 20 bananas you can buy. Now, when the price will be dropping, okay, when the price will be dropping, that means that with the same money, with the same $10, you can buy actually more bananas now. So the purchasing power of $10 was 20 banana. Now, when the price of banana goes down, you can buy more. It means the real money value will increase. So it will be considered as the real money supply will be increasing. When the real money supply increases, interest rate will fall. How it is? Well, when the real money supply increases, money supply and interest rate is the price of money. Okay, interest rate is the price of money. Let me draw it in here and show you guys how it works. So here, this side is the price. Okay. This is the line. This side we will say as price. Price of money is your interest rate. Think this way. When you actually take a loan from the bank, Okay, you are taking a loan from the bank. Let's say you took $100,000 from the bank. After 1 year, you will have to return $110,000 to the bank. The 10,000 extra you paying, this is the money in interest. So we consider that interest as the rent of your hiring money. You hired $100,000 from the bank, and you have to pay $10,000 extra on top of $100,000 when you return. Like for example, let's say like you are renting a car. Okay, you rent the car, you take the car, you do the work what you need to do. After that, you return the car with some extra money. Same. You take the money from the bank, you return the money, and you add some extra on that. That extra money is your interest. That's why you call price for hiring money is your interest rate. And this side, we call this one as quantity of money. Okay. So when there will be more quantity, more supply of money, the price will be dropped. It means interest rate will be dropped. When there is more supply of any goods, the price will be dropped. Same for the money. When there will be more supply of money, okay, then the price of money will be dropping. That's how they mean here. When the price of goods decreases, the real money supply will be increasing. When there is real money supply increases, interest rate will be dropped. When the interest rate drops, investment will be high. Okay, investment will be high. When the investment is high, aggregate demand will be increasing and the national income will be increasing too. Now, let's talk about the exchange rate. So 3 things here: wealth or income effect, then it is interest rate effect, and the exchange rate effect. Okay, so 3 different effects we will have here. And we say here when the price drops, like again the same way how it affects us, we see it here. When this thing happens, the price of goods will be decreasing, real money supply will increase, interest rate will be dropped, outflow of capital will be increasing. It means investment will be increasing. Okay, and these will have an impact on our value of domestic currency or depreciation occurs. So the value of domestic currency will be actually going down. When the value of currency goes down, in export will be increasing. Now the question is how does the exchange rate goes down when there is outflow of capital? Look, you will see this is the thing is known as Dutch disease. What happens is this, that when the value of money increases, for example, let's say $1 Australian is, for example, let's say 5 Chinese RMB. Okay. Now, if someone wants to buy a $10 wine from Australia, they will have to pay 50 RMB. Okay. Now, when the appreciation is there, when there will be appreciation, that time the Chinese people will have to pay more than 50 RMB for same $10. For same $10 wine, they will have to pay more than 50 RMB. So Chinese people will start to feel the price of goods has increased in Australia. In fact, it did not. It did not increase. Just the exchange rate has changed. Just the exchange rate has changed. Okay. Now, so when it will be depreciated, for example, let's say same $10, Now the Chinese people will do not have to pay 50 RMB anymore. Let's say they are paying 40 RMB. Okay, because of exchange rate, it was $1 is equal to now 4 RMB, not 5 anymore. When it is 4, it means it has depreciated. Okay. Now the Chinese people will start to think, now if we buy a bottle of wine, $10 bottle of wine, we are paying actually 40 RMB. So Chinese people will start to feel the price of Australian wine has gone down. Okay. So as a result, they will be purchasing more. And these will increase the net export. That's how they mean here. Okay. All right. Changes and shift in aggregate demand curve. Okay. So you can see aggregate demand curve is here, the normal demand curve we have. So one side is price level, and the side is GDP. That's the difference. In normal demand curve, we see one is price is fine on the y-axis, but x-axis is quantity. But here, the same quantity, but quantity produced, which means our GDP. That's what we do here. So aggregate demand curve is actually one side is price level, another side is GDP. And when you say that a shift in aggregate demand, it means that you'll see here. I will show another one too. Here, notice something. Let's say we have an aggregate demand at AD1. Is our aggregate demand. When the demand curve will be shifting, when the aggregate demand will be less, it will be shifting to the left, ADO, AD0. When aggregate demand will increasing, or the real GDP will be increasing, it will be shifting to the right, AD2. Okay, just to show you guys how to draw the shift of the demand curve. Okay. Now, what about the aggregate? Actually, we have explained here not much. In case of component part, GDP consumption, any of this, it will be shifting to the right. So if you go back in here, that C, I, G, X, any of these four increases, aggregate demand curve will be shifting to the right. But for import M, when M will be decreasing, shifting to the right. So you have to know this equation and know their signs. Okay, the sign C is positive, I is positive, G is positive, X is positive, but M is negative. So as a result, when you will see that any one of these C, I, G, and X will be increasing, aggregate demand curve will be shifting to the right. But if the M is decreasing, aggregate demand curve will be shifting to the right again. So C, I, G, and X increases and M decreases, aggregate demand curve will be shifting to the right. Opposite way, if C, I, G, and X decreases and M increases, aggregate demand curve will be shifting to the left. That's the rule you need to follow. Now let's talk aggregate supply curve. So aggregate supply curve is two ways. One is called short-run aggregate supply. Another one is known as long-run aggregate supply. Okay. SRAS and LRAS. Two of them. The short-run aggregate supply curve shows how firms adjust the quantity of how firms adjust the quantity of real output they will supply when the price level changes, holding all other prices are fixed. So short-run supply curve is actually right exactly the same way that we see our normal supply curve is here. Supply curve will be like this. But long-run supply curve is different. We'll talk about it soon. Okay, supply curve. When the price level goes high, producers produces more. As a result, GDP increases and the supply increases. Okay. So when the price level goes high, producers actually produces more, which means aggregate supply increases. When the aggregate supply increases, meaning your GDP will be, real GDP will be increasing too. Okay. And in the same way, aggregate supply curve, you can see, if the aggregate supply decreases, okay, it will be shifting to the left. If it increases, it will be shifting to the right. All right. Now we'll be talking here about equilibrium position. Equilibrium is exactly the same way that we learn in our macroeconomics. So when the demand and supply curve intersect, we call that equilibrium position. Okay. So look at what happens in this case, that at P1 level, P1 price, you can see aggregate supply is high and the aggregate demand is not high, not that much. So aggregate supply is more than the aggregate demand. Okay, P1 level. Okay, so it means that the price is high. Okay, price is high. People will be demanding less. When the price is high, people will be demanding less. Aggregate demand curve will be decreasing. When the aggregate demand decreases, aggregate supply will be decreasing too. Okay, this is at price level P1, aggregate supply exceeds the aggregate demand, both contract towards the equilibrium point, and both of them will be coming to the equilibrium point. The same way, at price P2 level, when the aggregate demand is more than the aggregate supply, they will be contracting to the equilibrium point. So what does it mean? It means that the country will be in equilibrium if the price, even the price is high or low, they will be actually coming back, contracting back, traveling back to the equilibrium point. Now let's talk about long-run supply curve. Long-run supply curve is a vertical line. Why it is a vertical line? Let me show you actually how it looks like. This one. Purple color, this is long-run aggregate supply. Okay. Why it is? It means that how much a country can supply. Can a country supply unlimited goods? No, a country cannot supply unlimited goods. Why is that? Because of some restriction limitations on the resources available. Australia has, let's say, 50 million kangaroos, for example. Australia has 50 million kangaroos. So if someone says Australia is selling kangaroos, for example, and you will see how much how many kangaroos can Australia supply maximum. Australia cannot supply more than 50 million kangaroos. That's all they have. So whatever the price is, there is no reason to think if the price increases, they will be supplying more. Yes, they will be supplying more, but up to a certain level. Which level? Up to 50 million kangaroos they will supply. They cannot supply 50 million and 1 kangaroos. No, not possible. They can supply maximum 50 million because that's all they have. So that's why whatever the price level is, doesn't matter. Supply will be fixed at one stage. Okay. So that's what they mean here, long-run aggregate supply curve. The long-run aggregate supply curve shows the amount of goods and services an economy can produce when all resources, labor, and capital are fully employed. And so that means the maximum they have. So long run aggregate supply is a vertical line. At potential output, a rise in the price level means the price means that all prices, including the input prices, available resources do not rise. It means 50 million kangaroos will be remain the constant. It cannot be increased. Thus, neither does the potential output. So yes, the resources cannot be increased. So the supply cannot increase as well. So that's why we always show that the long run aggregate supply curve is a vertical line. Okay. Now, if you talk about demand pull inflation is caused by the rise in aggregate demand. When the demand increases, the price of the goods will be increasing too. When the demand increases, the price of the goods will be increasing, which will be also inflation. As we know, always know that when there is an average increase in price, we call that inflation. When there is an average increase in price, we call that as inflation. When there is average decrease in price, we call that deflation. Okay. We call that deflation. So now we say the short-term supply or short-term effect on the aggregate supply. They say the steeper the aggregate supply curve, the more price will rise and the less output will increase. Let me show you this. Aggregate supply curve in here. Okay. And this one is the long run one. And you can see the red line is our aggregate supply for short run. And this blue one is also aggregate supply in short run. So how it works? Look, the country was in equilibrium at point A, for example. Okay. They are at point A was their equilibrium position. Then what happened? The aggregate demand has increased. Okay. People started to actually demand more. Okay. So the aggregate demand curve has increased from A to B. Okay. Now the problem is now the equilibrium has shifted to B point. Okay. It shifted to the B point. But the country cannot supply at point B. What they're going to do? They're going to increase the price. Why to increase the price? The price will be increasing to actually suppress the demand. Okay. When the price will be actually increasing, people will not be demanding more. But anyway, it's not possible for the country to produce more because they have already recruited all their resources to make the production. So that time you'll see the price will go high. Okay. Yes, price will be increasing. As a result, the supply will be supply more, but they cannot supply more than C because that's the maximum they can supply. Like we said here, the maximum they can supply at this vertical line. If you go here, maximum they can supply at point C. So at a higher price, they will be supplying the maximum point. And because the price has gone up, okay, demand will be also going down at this point. Okay. So even they have higher desire to have more and more goods, but because of the supply shortage, they cannot actually demand more. But customers will be paying more money. So you can see these things in here. Demand pull inflation. This is the supply and this is the demand we have. Okay. When the people will be start to demand more, aggregate supply will be going to the right. When the aggregate supply goes high, at new equilibrium point, you can see price will be going up. When the price goes up, we call that inflation. That's why we call the demand pull inflation. And there will be more demand. Okay, there will be more demand. The more demand will actually pull the price level to go high. Okay. And you can see here. Okay, yeah. This one. Now we'll be discussing this on the same. At stage 1, how it works. We'll show you now how it works. If the economy is already at full employment, it means the maximum supply. GDP 1. Okay. Yeah. An increase in aggregate demand. So you can see from here, it will be increasing the aggregate demand at this point from E1 to E2 equilibrium point will be here. Okay. All right. So so you can see an increase in demand in D2 will pull the prices higher from P1 to P2. The price will be going high. It was at E1 point. People will start to demand more. Demand curve will be going to the right at this point. Okay, equilibrium will be shifting to the right. The price has gone up. Okay. So P1 to P2. So national GDP temporarily expands from GDP1 to GDP2 and equilibrium shift from E1 to E2. Then what happens? Look at this, how we are going back again. Firms are unable to expand the real supply because the economy is already in full employment. Full employment means they're supplying at their best maximum. Everybody is working, all the resources are being used. They cannot supply more than that. So firms cannot actually supply more. So the supply will be actually decreasing. Okay. So GDP1 in response to shortage of supply, price increases from P1, P2 to P3. So you can see supply has gone down. So P1 again goes higher to P2. Coming back to this point. Okay. And GDP returns to his original point of GDP1. So you can say it will be actually increasing in temporarily, it will increase. So if you go in here, it says here temporarily expands from GDP1 to GDP2. The temporary increment will be there. Okay, but it will be again going back to its equilibrium at the same position, so previous position, but at a higher price. Okay. It will keep going like this. That's why you will see a lot of countries in Australia, even in Australia too, when the volatility start to demand high, government try to actually push the prices to go high. People will not be demanding that. And cost push inflation. Cost push inflation is this: when the price, the price to produce the item is high. Okay, the cost of every item is high. As a result, the price will be increasing too, because the cost price is high. The production cost is high. When the production cost is high, people will be actually have to pay more for that money. The prices go high, which is known as the cost push inflation. So two types of inflation are there: demand pull and cost push. Demand pull means that when the people will be demanding more, but the supply remains the same, the price will be go high. This is known as demand pull. And cost push means to produce the item, the cost price is high. That is cost push. Okay. How is your assignment going, guys?
Wasn't it due last Sunday?
Yeah, it was due Sunday night. Just gone.
Let me have a look. I just checked, it was on today, isn't it? Let me see.